Hi there, Steve Kaufman here. Day 72 of my 90-day challenge in Korean. What's that leave me? 28 days? I better get a move on. I phoned up the Korean newspaper where I had my interview some 3, 4 weeks ago, and where I was so excited that I had been able to carry on this whole interview in Korean. And I was checking on whether they had published the article, which they had, and I received a copy of it. And I was trying to speak in Korean, and I totally failed. And I kind of have the feeling that my Korean has been slipping. And I think it dates from when I went to San Diego, and then, of course, the whole Ukraine situation, which has got me very interested in the events there. I mean, I literally, for the last few weeks, I've listened to more Russian and now recently Ukrainian than Korean. And one thing that is true is I have found, like when I did Chinese, and I basically from standing still to completing my British Foreign Service exam was like 9, 10 months. Concentration. I mean, there I was doing 6, 7 hours a day, and I was only doing one language. It's the fact that I'm now maybe doing 2 hours a day of Korean, and maybe listening to another 2 hours or so, or watching Ukrainian or Russian. It's a diversion, and that hurts you. I find some people can do it. Some people can do 2, 3 languages at the same time. I can't. And when I had that conversation, then I was more immersed, focused on Korean, which I am not now. However, so what I'm going to do here, the other thing is, as I'm reading these, fighting my way through these podcasts on literature, this is Kim Yong-ha's podcast, and reading them, I mean, it's very difficult stuff. I can more or less make it out when I read it. Some of the words that I have looked up, I may forget them again, and I'll click on the yellow word. But by and large, I can pick my way through it. I don't understand it when he speaks. Like I get the odd word, but I don't really follow the drift that well. Some of it is pretty esoteric. I don't know that I'd understand it in English. Really, history and current events is more my bag, what I'm interested in. However, the Kim Yong-ha is kind of an enchanting type of guy because of his voice, and he kind of meanders around subjects, and I feel that it's stretching my knowledge because I'm listening to a Korean intellectual talk about life and art and literature and things that concern him, and so that's kind of expands me a little bit. Whereas focusing every day on politics and current events, I'm learning more facts and gaining some perspective on events, but it's not expanding my mind. So I'm hanging in with this Kim Yong-ha. But I may, for the last 28 days, and if I should add too, that just as with when I did Czech and I had these Tolki Česko minulosti, which were quite difficult, but were giving me a glimpse into the Austro-Hungarian Empire, or even older historical events in Czechoslovakia, it was very difficult, but I had a whole year to kind of meander through it. So I wasn't worried that I wasn't consolidating. But I kind of feel now I have to try to consolidate. So I don't have a year to spend, or 6 months to spend with Kim Yong-ha if I'm going to try to demonstrate some improvement in my Korean. So I'm consolidating. I've already started going through those patterns that I had on our exchange and link I had translated and recorded in Korean. I'm going to go through some of my easier content. I'm going to reread and reread those. I think I've done 8 or 9 of Kim Yong-ha's podcast. Going to read them again, some of the lessons that I've already done. I think I'm going to try here in these last 28 days to consolidate again. Again, it's something that I wouldn't do if I was just off on my usual meander with no particular timelines, as was the case with Russian and Czech, or Portuguese for that matter. So I'm going to try to consolidate, see if that makes me perform a little better in the sort of talking scenarios. Just a quick note on the Ukraine. I've discovered some very interesting sources on the internet. There's this Savik Schuster, which is a TV show, which is on the internet, Schuster Live, and it's half in Ukrainian, or more. So when I listen, I understand the Russian. I don't understand the Ukrainian that well, although I understand Ukrainian better than Korean, partly because I'm familiar with the context, partly because a lot of words are similar to Russian. And so what I now do to get better, my ability to understand Korean or at least Ukrainian is improving. So what I do is I take articles from online Ukrainian newspapers, I put them into Google Translate, and I have Russian. So I go from Ukrainian to Russian. So I see how the Ukrainian words change into Russian words. There's a lot of H's in Ukrainian, and many is, I can't remember what it was, but it's bahate or something, and pamahat, and lots of hots going on, and hose. So I got to try to get used to it. They kind of throw me off, but if I can get used to those, that's going to help me. And if I'm confused, if even the Russian is unclear, I just can switch it to English so easily. So Google Translate is actually a tremendous tool for language learning, especially if you're trying to get the gist of very similar languages. I might just finish with, because I had a video some while ago where I spoke about the situation in Ukraine, and I said that I thought that Putin was saber-rattling and creating this kerfuffle in the Crimean as a means of putting pressure on the situation in Ukraine, which had kind of gotten out of control while he was off watching the Olympics. I don't think that was the case. Things have moved so quickly in Russia, I have to assume that he had planned this ahead of time. He did say on March the 4th that he wasn't going to annex the Crimean, and then he did. So whether that was being duplicitous or whether events just got out of control, I don't know. And this gets back to Tolstoy's comment in War and Peace about how there's a decision here and a decision there and a decision here, and pretty soon the thing gathers momentum and you've got this war where people are dying. I can't imagine that Putin will walk into eastern and southern Ukraine. I think there's a fair amount of alarm out there, justifiably so. Nothing would stop him. I mean, his army, like Russia, would be strong enough to go wherever they wanted to go. But the long-term consequences for Russia, for Ukraine, for the world economy, I mean, the damage to Russia's economy, Ukraine's economy, the economy of all the countries around there, Latvia, for example, even with the sanctions, they're very much affected. Europe, I just can't imagine. And so, being the eternal optimist, my optimistic scenario is that in Ukraine they will come up with a government that is acceptable to people both in the west and central parts of the country as well as in the eastern and southern parts of the country. That Ukraine will have a stronger sense of its identity than it had before, because they had, for at least a period, a sense of a common enemy. And that, however, they will not want to join NATO, and I hope they don't, that there will be an association of some kind and greater involvement with the European Union, and that hopefully that becomes a sort of a bridge even with Russia that tones down the degree of mistrust that has developed between Russia and the West over the last decade, and that it might in fact end up being a bit of a milestone and things start winding down towards a situation where the greatest common interest of most people prevails. Time will tell. There have been very tragic events in the 20th century that unfolded in the other direction. In other words, not in the direction of common sense. Okay, thanks for listening. And as I say, I'm going to be consolidating my Korean. And I'm going to go tomorrow night to a meeting of the Korea. They have like the Korean Canadian Businessmen's Association or something, and they have a get to know each other, get together thing. So I'm going to go there. They're all mostly young, movers and shakers, business people. So when they see an old geezer like me come in, they're not that interested in talking to me. And if I hit them with my Korean, they'll be even less interested in talking to me. But hey, why do I care? That's what I'm going to do tomorrow night. Bye for now.